Many cults start off with high ideals. They get corrupted by leaders or their board of advisors who become power hungry and dominate and control members' lives. No group with high ideals starts off as a cult. They become one when their errant ways are exposed. Philip Zimbardo. Many cults start off with high ideals.
Hello.
Still getting used to some things on our end, but not bad.
Technical
Not bad.
difficulties.
Not bad.
We haven't been doing this for years and years and years. It just started yesterday.
We haven't really done a lot of intros and outros and such. So we did the intro last week, and I've been in a frenzy to get a lot of stuff done in the past couple of days. Anyways, I'm going to step back because this is not my show. This is not Spider's show.
Uh-oh.
This is
Interns only.
Interns
Promotion.
only show. So Steven, take it away.
All right, so tonight we're going to be talking about cults. And so first, I wanted to start off. I asked ChatGPT, what is the difference between religion and cults? And the answer it gave me, and we're not going to get into the full thing. We're just going to briefly go over some, minor details about it. They said that basically what it told me is the main difference between religion and a cult is social perception, size, longevity, and structure, though the line can be a little blurry. And it goes into a more detailed breakdown on the differences between size and recognition, longevity, leadership, beliefs and practices, control over members, and public perception. So I wanted to see what Robert and Spider think about this. So Spider, you go first.
Well, the fun thing about a cult is when it's called a cult, that means it's not really acceptable most of the time.
Yeah.
The biggest difference, like there's a lot of sociological differences and things like the article you've got there. We'll go into a lot of detail about it, but what it comes down to is if a large number of people see it as something that's not for them and see it as something that's subversive or, in other words, negative, then it's cult and not a religion. A lot of the big religions that we have now, which is Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, were all considered a cult individually at one time in history, because when they started, they were not particularly accepted by the widest margin, and now they're the most clear form of religion we have, along with Buddhism and Hinduism and some of the other ones on the side there. So now, because they're more accepted by a vast majority of people, that makes them not a cult anymore.
Yeah.
Although it depends on who you ask.
So I like that you actually mentioned Buddhism in particular, because that was actually one of the exact examples that ChatGPT gave me as something that started off initially as a cult and grew into religion later on down the road. And Robert, what do you think about the difference between cults and religions?
I mean, even Christianity started off as somewhat cult-like in its very infancy. But I think the difference between the two, for me, is where the power goes once it kind of gets off the ground. Once you see the full person or that person, I'm sure people in the Middle East thought that Paul was a cult leader at first until, he didn't go around and try to take all the followers' wealth and everything else, and he didn't lead them all to an early grave, as a lot of cults will see tend to do so. They tend to gather all the wealth. In one of the cults you'll be speaking about later, people's daughters, and kind of take them as, their own.
Yeah.
And also, I think, too, the difference between the two, at least for me, is religion or relationship, however you want to say it, in its purest form, isn't about wealth and power. It's about enlightening oneself, becoming a better person than you were yesterday, in its purest form. Cults, in their purest form, are all about control. It's all about a one person or a group of people maintaining and keeping control by any means necessary. And I think, Extremism in religion can be mirroring cult-like statuses. On the same token, um, religion isn't always bad.
Yeah.
It's just it gets twisted and turned so much that sometimes it becomes a cult. So for me, that's the difference. It's really all about the power. Who in the cult has the power, and who in the religion has the power. In religion, God has the power, and you're just a servant of the Lord, right?
Yeah.
But in a cult, you are a servant of another human being who thinks that they're a god.
Yeah.
It tends to play off a little bit different.
Okay. I like how you worded that about the power being one of the major differences, because now that you mention it, that actually makes me think about it. And one of the major differences, in my opinion, between a cult and a religion is freedom. Most religions, it's like if you don't believe in it, well, that's fine, whatever. But if it's a cult and you don't believe in it, they'll like some of them can even go out as far as to ruin your life, and stuff like that. So I think that's a very good way of putting it. And to clarify for Little Beans and Rice in the chat, the major difference between a cult and religion is just social acceptance. I think that is a major part of it. And I also think, like Robert said, another major part is about the control and whether you worship an actual human being or, a deity of some sort. So next, I wanted to start off with the Bayek Bayek cult. So in 1937, Japan had colonial rule over Korea. During this time, there was a small village which began producing a foul stench, and a black liquid started to seep from the ground. And when the police investigated, they found over 300 bodies twisted in unnatural angles. So let's go ahead and start right there. What do you guys think this is, Spider?
Um, well, it's hard to say because looking at some of the information that's available, they never exactly, I think, found out the core of the whole thing.
Yeah.
It still seems like a lot of it was really shocking and really kind of just it seemed, I think they chalked it up to people being just kind of crazy
Yeah.
really at the time, but I don't think they came across a real core set of beliefs on what these people were doing and why they were doing it. The biggest thing I've noticed is this mantra that they're supposed to chant that's like 50 syllables long. Um, I would almost want to challenge everybody to try to do it, but then I would have to do it myself, and I think it's going to just be butchered either way. Um, but a lot of it, I think, ended up being that it was really just a very charismatic person at the top who
Yeah.
got a lot of these people to give him their money, to give him their family members, specifically their daughters and wives, and then just do whatever he wanted. And that added to the remains that they found, which they weren't
Yeah.
very good about covering up, apparently, if it
Not at
bubbled up
all.
through the ground. Um, because they and what's interesting is because that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
The article here says that the
Over
800
60
remains of dead
women.
people, 800 remains of dead people were found, and specifically they were supposed to be all murdered because they tried to go to commands against the commands of the religious founders. So if 800 people were going against him, how many people were following along with that by contrast? Because 800 is a pretty big number
Yeah.
as far as these things go. And they would have just kept going if that hadn't been found. So it wasn't like they were particularly secretive about what they were doing if that number of people found out and said, no, we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
So it
There's a lot going on with this one.
it's a good uh, it's a good horror movie plot
Ooh, it
is
would
what it
be.
is.
Yeah.
Um, apparently there were a couple of films made, one in 61 and one in 92. that reference it. But as far as like, you could probably make a pretty good movie out of
Yeah.
that these days.
And Rob, what do you think about this so far?
So, doing the research that I did about it, it actually, and this is so everybody knows, it was actually a offshoot of an offshoot. So, the
Ah,
offshoot of the offshoot that it took was from Chendoism, which was an antithesis of Christianity at the time. So, Chendoism was the spiritual belief that virtue throughout the world could happen by saving all beings from suffering, and you protect the nation as well as ensuring the well-being of the people and trying to create heaven on earth. Well, that splintered off into the Bakdogyo, which was a group founded by his father, the cult leader's father, Jeon Jung Un, in the 1900s. And then once the father died, almost like a junior, I guess would be,
yeah,
um, kind of took over. So the middle child, Jeon Young Hee, took over and kind of changed the name to the Bagbite cult.
yeah.
Uh, but his other two sons were also, because he had three sons, the other two did their own cult things. They didn't really, go as as crazy as this one did. And I want to let you guys know the translation for that is the white teachings, but it's actually the pure white teachings, and not white in a
Uh-huh.
racial tone, but
Yeah,
white in a pure tone.
like
Now, a
The
lot
natural.
of
whitest of white,
yeah,
cleanest of clean.
Yeah.
a lot of Asian culture venerates the color white as being clean, and we have to look at it from the lens of occupied. Something that kind of fascinated me here. It was very much akin to a serial killer that was running around during wartime France and just killing people and blaming it on the Germans, or they helped people get out of Germany, helped get out, meaning they killed them and buried them in a stove.
Oh,
And this is very reminiscent of that, because if Japan doesn't occupy the Korean Peninsula, does this religion get off the ground? People need hope in desperate times, and when you have an occupying force,
hmm,
that's the best. That's the best thing you can hope for. And the interesting part here is that we have to look at it from the lens of the early 1900s. We can't look at it from the lens of like a
yeah.
David Koresh or a Charles Manson era. This is a different time. And I have a news article in Korean that I will probably put in the group. That was it. You didn't have mass media, you didn't have the abilities police have today. And like Spider said, when they found the ooze leaking up out of the ground, that was it. And he had a squad. He had a secret police, if you will. That's how massive this cult was for the time. He had a secret police called the Owl Squad that was made of teenage boys and girls. Why? Because teenagers are easy to influence. That's why they don't. I'm not saying that they're not intelligent, but they don't have the critical thinking abilities that adults do. As you get older and mature, you sort of develop those critical thinking aspects of your life. So, if we look at the time, if we look at the place, and we look at the events surrounding it, we're going to see that, okay, this is I see why this is happening. Uh, but it does beg the question: if the Japanese didn't occupy the Korean Peninsula, would it in fact have happened? Would people have been um, less intelligent? Because obviously it's usually poor farmers and things like that join this kind of stuff. And that's not to take away from anything, but if you don't have the ability to have the intelligence, or if you're not sent to school, if you don't have that education, you can fall for things a lot easier.
So you're saying that because Japan had occupied Korea at this time, and it was like a very tense time for all the citizens. Maybe they didn't exactly have time to focus on, educating themselves or studying, and they just accepted this, cult because it was something that would accept them back. It
I
was
think so.
something like that gave them hope for the future.
I think so, because he goes on to say that, and this draws back to my original point earlier of power and wealth. He said that if you give me enough wealth, I will gain enough spiritual power to remove Japan from Korea. And people said,
Yeah.
"Oh,
Well,
we'll
that
we'll
sounds
pay
good.
you, and you can get that out of here." And I want to stress something really quick. This is an apocalyptic cult. And a lot of cults you'll see thrive on end of the world stuff because what that does is first that says, okay, I don't need my material possessions if the world's going to end in 1904 or 1919 or whenever, right? Uh, and you don't have the access to the knowledge that we have where you can be like, oh, how many other people have said this? We haven't heard this from anybody. And obviously he paints himself as sort of a messiah. And he says, I have 53 safe houses scattered throughout the Korean peninsula. Because at the time there wasn't really a North Korea and South Korea, right? So we don't have that North Korean aspect to involve ourselves in. But he said there's 53. And guess who was the only one who knew where they were? Of
He and his
course,
people.
no, just him. Because
Oh,
you don't want to let them know, because like Spider said, when your people are starting to turn against you at a high rate,
yeah.
you don't want to let them know, because if they go there and don't find it, now you're cooked. And so, that's a whole other issue too. Like Spider said, he just started killing people. Like when he was
Yeah.
reading the articles and stuff earlier, he just killed people at that point. He didn't care. You get to a point where you get so much wealth, that you just start, I don't care, I'll just kill you. And then you have your people kill them. And, you know, um, the one thing that he did that really drew everybody in was for the time when Japan found gold in their caves, they mined it all, right? So he would go and take the gold that he amassed from his father, take it to a cave, leave it there, come back, and then say he found it. So they said,
That's
"Oh my goodness, he is a
genius.
spiritual leader." And then there you go. So now you can make gold appear. I'm in.
Oh,
I'm
nice.
in. And once again, if you're a poor class and you see somebody that can get gold, you have hopes that, oh, he can restore our nation
Yep.
via wealth. And we find out that didn't really happen.
Now, I would also like to mention that when I was looking into this cult, for me personally, it reminded me of an area in Fallout 4 where if you go to these people, they'll be in like really fancy business suits and they'll be like, "Hey, give us all your possessions. We need all your possessions. We'll help you out." And you can actually give them all your possessions and then you just like walk away. And it's a very
Yeah.
weird, like random interaction and I never understood it. So here's what I
Mm-hmm.
got on this cult, going into the details of what I got. Now, as you mentioned a moment ago, it means white, white. They had a belief in purification through a chosen one, and the leader was a man named Jean Yonghai. I hope I pronounced that right. I apologize. He preached that the world was ending and claimed to be divine, requiring total obedience. He was able to convince people to follow him by saying that only his followers would be saved, and that was how he brainwashed them and forced them to turn over all their wealth to him. And if they refused, they would be secretly executed and buried. As you were saying, that's why they found all the bodies leaking up, as Spider was mentioning with the black ooze. It wasn't black ooze. His cult was nothing more than an excuse for uh, you know, mass murder. He got over 60 women in total became his concubines, and those who became um, impregnated or upset him will immediately be disposed of. In 1937, as you mentioned earlier, Yu Gonyong exposed the truth after his own family had fallen victim to this disturbing cult. He attempted to assassinate Jean, their leader, but alas, he failed. And though he failed, his report to the police did actually trigger a nationwide investigation, with the 314 bodies being uncovered, and it was estimated that there were over 350 victims, and it was dubbed one of the worst mass murders in Asian history. Jean was evaded capture by the police. However, 50 days later, they found a mutilated corpse, which was believed to have been Jean himself, as it was identified by not only cult leaders, but even his own families, and authorities ruled it a suicide, which would be the final nail in the coffin for the Bayek Bayek cult. They had even removed Jian's brain, claiming it was for criminal research, but in 2011, it was publicly cremated due to public outcry. The Bayek Bayek cult have faded into obscurity over time, but there are more cults very similar to appear later, such as in Jonestown, USA, 1978, with Jim Jones, when he led his 900 followers to their end, and a mass Kool-Aid party that would end up being their very last Kool-Aid party. As, everyone knows about that one. So what I wanted to ask you now is, what do you think happened to Jean to have him end up like that? Spider?
I think he got murked, to be
Yeah.
perfectly honest. I think somebody got around to being like, this dude sold us out. Like, the police are knocking on everything. They're arresting people. We murdered all these people. I got no money. My daughter was taken from me. My wife ran off. I got nothing. I'm going to find him, and I'm going to get him. And
Yep.
nobody's going to catch me afterwards because nobody really cares about this dude. And I think that's probably what happened. He might have done it himself, because a lot of cult leaders do. When things kind of start falling around you, a lot of cult leaders, they, for lack of a better term, drink their own Kool-Aid, and they end up offing themselves, either to try to inspire everyone else and to show, yes, see, you'll see I was right all the way up to the end, or because
Yeah.
maybe they're just crazy, or because they're like, you know what, we're all screwed. So the only thing I can do is just take this way out. But I personally feel like somebody found him and then made it look like he did it.
Yeah.
Because by the sounds of all the stuff that he did, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody long after that was feeling
Still
a good,
upset.
clean conscience after having taken him out of the picture.
Yeah. And Robert?
He was murked. I 100% believe he was murked.
Yeah.
Just his attitude as a whole, very snakish. And he was getting away from the police. That's the thing to remember
Yep.
here. It's not like the police surrounded him and then he killed himself. No. Somebody had a bone to pick, because one of the it goes on to say, one of the guys that it was the grandson of a farmer that had followed this man. He went to go talk to him about it, and he was okay. It's cool so far. Honey coated words. But then the wealth part came in about having to give all your money, and so a scuffle ensued, and he was the only one to get away. So when he reported it to the police then found the bodies. The police, because he took them to the temple where this cult was, fanatical. Took the police there. They found the bodies. Next thing you know, they're on a manhunt, and they find him. It was probably, I think, months, weeks. I forget the time frame on that one, but he was bloated, which means that he had been there for a bit, and he had a stab wound. But I don't think the stab wound was self-inflicted. I
Yeah.
think the stab wound was 100%, caused by someone in his group or somebody disgruntled. But I also think at the same time, if he would have not died, if he would have not gotten murdered, he would have 100% tried to start another cult somewhere else. That's just the vibe that I
Yeah.
got reading about him, is that he wasn't going to go out without a fight.
He
And
was gonna
so,
keep trying.
yes, and when he had that fight, the fight had him.
Yep. I can agree with all that. I think we're all in agreement on that one.
Mm.
So next we're gonna move on to Santa Muerte, or Holy Death. This is the Mexican folk saint of death, and she is dressed in a long gown with a skull for a face and her bony hand holding a scythe. She is often seen as morbid and menacing as the female Grim Reaper. So if you're a big fan of Deadpool like I am, then you know Deadpool is in love with Santa Muerte. That's the one he loves. So, anyways, continuing on. She is frequently tied to drug cartels and other criminal activities within TV and the press, often called Holy Death in English, and the Catholic Church has called her a heretical saint, stating that her followers are satanic. However, most Mexican citizens who worship Santa Muerte consider themselves Catholic and see nothing wrong with her. So let's go ahead and pause right there for a minute. Spider, Do you see anything wrong with Santa Muerte so far?
I think it's interesting because a lot of cultures throughout history have gravitated towards overt death cults. Um, there's a couple different ways to approach it. Some people like there are people who call Christianity a death cult because of its veneration of Jesus having died on the cross and everything. But there's a difference between something like that and something where it's actually a dead figure. The figure is dead. They stayed dead. They didn't rise from the dead.
Yeah,
They may be alive in some afterlife, but technically they're still dead completely.
and always have been.
And it's very interesting because it's one of the primordial kind of ideas that we have as far as religious concepts from ancient times that we can find any sort of writings on. We've got death cults, we've got snake cults, and we've got those kind of things. All fears from ancient people who they were afraid to die, they were afraid of monsters, they were afraid of the dark. These were the basis of most of these early sort of cult ideas that may or may not have blossomed into religion. Um, I'm the whole Santa Muerte thing is really interesting because it continues today. There
Yeah.
are a lot of people who ascribe to some aspect of it today. It was actually part of the focus of a game that Rob and I have played. It was Rainbow Six Wildlands, wasn't it? Rainbow Six? Yeah.
Nice.
No,
No,
it
it
was.
was
It
it
was not
was
Rainbow Six, but it was.
oh
It wasn't
Ghost
Tom Clancy.
Ghost
Ghost
Recon.
Ghost Recon.
Ghost Recon
Yeah.
Wildlands, and the main villain was an adherent to Santa Muerte, and
Ah.
his followers and his cartel were all, and it was pretty good.
It was
It
great.
Yeah.
was it was very very good. It
It was
was.
great.
I've always had kind of not to go on too much of a tangent, but I've always had kind of an issue with some of those games because the game physics are kind of wonky sometimes, and they don't always work the way you want them to. And the game after it was not as good. It was okay.
Yeah.
It was okay, but it wasn't as good. But this one got real deep into some of the cult stuff. So if anybody out there is interested in kind of experiencing something, not it's a little it's dramatized, of course.
Yeah.
It's a video game, it's not going to be the most accurate thing in the entire world, but it does give you a good introduction to how some of these people look at Santa Muerte. And it also includes predator levels, which is pretty awesome
Ooh.
because
That
that
sounds
ties
fun.
into the whole thing because it's a whole death cult with the trophies and
Yeah.
everything. So, you can kind of get your whole sci-fi everything all in one go. Um, but the thing about it is a death cult will always find a way to have new members because there's always more death in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Anything significant happens, you can easily say, oh, well, it was the will of Santa Muerte. All these people in
Yep.
that plane crash, or all these people on those trains, or all these people from this virus, or all these people from whatever. And that's something that happened with the not to get too deep into it because of YouTube, but uh, a few years ago with a lot of the virus restrictions and things, with a lot of the casualties across the world, the Santa Muerte folks
Yeah.
weighed into that. They were like, "Oh, this is obviously Santa Muerte. She's taking people. She's coming up in power because all these people are expiring across the world."
Uh-oh.
And so there was a renewed kind of push when that happened. It's a very interesting thing, and those are kind of the most dangerous
Yeah.
that you have to watch out for because they're big and they're not necessarily organized, but they are big and they're simple because it's a very simple ideology. It's not a whole lot of complex stuff. It's not a lot of it could easily, very easily become a rampaging
Yeah.
group of terrorist cells without a whole lot of pushing. So it's something to keep an eye on. It's very fascinating, but also something that could potentially become dangerous, especially with all the trouble we have right now with the cartel traffic
Yeah.
at the southern border already.
I've seen a lot of news media have cartel gang members that have like tattoos of Santa Muerte on them
Mm.
and stuff like that. Now, Rob, what do you think about Santa Muerte so far?
Well, first, we got to shout out El Sueño, or in fact, that's a Ghost Recon joke there. Uh,
Ah,
this is one of my favorite studies. I think I've
yep.
come across in my time here on this planet. Uh, it very much is a mixture of Aztec culture and Catholicism intertwined, because a lot of your Aztec, Incan, Mayan were very heavily into death, to a point where dying for your god was supposedly the highest level that you could reach in that civilization. So I think it plays on a lot of that. I also find it just fascinating, the lore behind it, if you will. It's very much, and I have to wonder if it's mind over matter stuff with a lot of Santa Muerte things, because they venerate her in a way that they embrace death. They
Yes.
one day we're gonna die. Let's embrace it. Let's try to keep ourselves from it. But when it's our time, the Bony Lady, as she is nicknamed,
Yes.
or
I was gonna
La
mention
Nina
that.
Bonita, the beautiful lady. She has many different nicknames and many
Yep.
different colors that mean certain things. Um,
La
and it's interesting
Madrina.
to note that in other South American countries, there's San Muerte, which is the male equivalent of Santa Muerte. Santa Muerte is just more popular. She's venerated more. And at one point, she was number one or number two behind St. Jude, which is a very popular figure. Now, we already know that Catholicism has a very strong grip over in Mexico, right? In a different way than it does in the United States. And so we see that, and we have to really understand that the culture that they come from, mixed with the Catholic culture, from them coming over, taking over the land, and making people follow that religion for so long, has intertwined them to. Very reminiscent of Catholicism and some of the barbaric tribes, where they imported some barbaric tribal beliefs to keep the barbarians at peace, as well as their Christian aspects. And they kind of merged them together, because we see a lot of saints venerated, just regular people, right? And that doesn't really happen in Christianity. They don't really venerate um, regular people, because we know that the Elohim is the one above all, so to speak, to cater to your Marvel knowledge there, Deadpool. I just think they're Stephen. So to me, it's fascinating, because death is an integral part of life, the great equalizer, as they call it. And in every religion, death is a focal point. Death in cults, focal point. This is a focal point. There's 10 to 12 million of these believers out there. And they're mostly in Mexico, obviously, some in Central America, and then some more up in Canada, and even a bit in Europe. I think when you have something like this, right, and the images and stuff, they're cool looking. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
lie to you. Like, I thought some of the art was pretty cool, and I think it's very interesting, because you see the Aztec, sort of that Mesoamerican art into that, but then you see the Catholic art into that as well. So it's just something to think about. For me personally, I just find it a fascinating study. I think that sort of thing is it's fascinating to me, because if you really sit down and analyze it, at the end of the day, it's all about death. And we as human beings, we are racing against death. But at the end of the day, when it's time, it's time. And,
All
that's
right.
it.
So, since you mentioned the art, I would actually like to share some Creative Commons art that I just searched up on Google.
Here we go.
So, let's see if I can figure out how to do this new present. Okay, present, share screen. All right, let's see if I can remember how to do this. Okay, here we go. So, can y'all see this? Okay. Let's pull up a few of these.
You said a little art, and you got a whole wall full of it.
You got a
Yes.
whole wall full of
So
it.
this one's pretty cool. It's like
Here's
a
just some
skeleton.
art.
It's like a skeleton praying. That one's pretty cool. Got a little owl over here with an hourglass. I like that.
Now, I want
So
to say,
yeah, go
pardon
ahead.
me for interrupting, but that owl and that hourglass are symbolic.
Oh, okay. Go
There,
ahead and
I was
there's
tell
gonna
us.
that
say.
that picture is very symbolic. The owl is a
Mm,
symbolic creature as a whole in a lot of different groups, like the Freemasons and the Order of the Golden Dawn, and all of those on there are symbolic. So that's
arrow
something to
symbolism.
think. Yes, that's something to think about when you're looking at something like this. Obviously, the
Yeah,
hourglass is the time you have left. The
and
owl's
that's the
wise,
Earth.
and then what?
The Earth right here.
She controls the earth in a way
Yeah.
because she's death. So
So yeah, they got some really cool artwork over here.
That's a
Some
heavy
cool
metal album
images.
cover. That's what that is.
Yes.
yeah,
And then someone did some makeup. It looks like. But yeah, I thought that would be cool to share some of these images. So let's go ahead and stop that. All right. So to finish up
Close
my
enough.
notes, the scholar Andrew Chestnut argues in his book that worshippers have been seeking her help through prayer, as she is seen by many to be the most powerful and fastest acting saint. Like, when you pray to her, she'll answer your prayers much faster than any other saint, is what they believe. Now, as you mentioned earlier, Bony Lady, La Niña Bonita, the pretty girl. But there were two more that I found that I would like to mention as well, as far as names that she goes by. La Madrina, the godmother, or even La Flaquita, the skinny girl. They say that she is willing to help because she judges nobody, as she is a folk saint or a saint of the people. So, like, she doesn't have judgment for any particular people one way or the other. Now, the folk saints are not officially recognized by the Vatican, but local people believe them to be holy with powers to help them in their daily life. As folk saints are outside of the Catholic Church, many followers believe they don't have to adhere to the same morals as they normally would at church when asking for help from a folk saint, since they will not be judged by the same morals. Now we get to talk about the Grim Reaper. It is believed that she was created during the colonial era from combining indigenous death deities with the Grim Reaper when the Spanish introduced Catholicism during the conquest of the region, like you mentioned earlier. Now, a lot of this is just me getting obsessive with the details, so I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. So, skipping ahead a little bit, in 2001, a quesadilla seller in Tepito, Mexico City, displayed a statue of Holy Death out front of her apartment building to thank her for freeing her son from prison, and this was when people finally had the courage to worship Holy Death openly after it had been banned previously. Now, people soon began to open temples for Holy Death and Jonathan Legario Vargas, or Commander Pantera, who was a charismatic and outspoken public leader in the growing devotion to Santa Muerte, and even built a 75-foot tall tower of Holy Death just outside of Mexico City, founding a temple to the folk saint. So let's pause right there. I want to know what you guys think about this really 75-foot tall tower. Spider, what do you think?
I mean, people will go all out for
Yep.
things that they really are into. I've seen, like, by contrast, we already know you can watch them on YouTube, on TikTok, on wherever. You know how people get during Christmas. I know how
Yeah.
some people in this show get during Christmas. But I know other people who like do the whole synchronized radio, Carol of the Bells, super stereo, projection, lights, all that other stuff every year. If you're into something, you're really into it.
Yep.
I don't know if I need to point out the number of robots I got sitting around me. I wouldn't build a 75-foot robot out on my front lawn. But,
Japanese paintings.
Obviously we all have things that we're like, this is all to the wall. All to the wall, this is what we're into. And when you add in religious devotion to that, it just boosts it. and people will go nuts for that kind of stuff. They'll build huge statues and murals and whatnot to show it off. And sometimes, I mean, there are a lot of places that are kind of oppressive that are gonna be like, no, you can't do that. No, we don't want that. No, whatever. But a lot of times in more open places, they're kind of like, if we try to mess with that, they're gonna go a little nuts. And if they go a little nuts, there might be people who like them who might go a little nuts. And if we let them have their big giant statue, I think they'll be fine. So
Yep.
let's let them have their big giant statue. And that's how it goes in a lot of places. And you'll have big giant areas like that where people show off just what they're into. And if they're religiously into it, that's what you'll get.
And I love how it started off as a statue and then ended up as a temple. And Rob, what do you think about the giant statue?
People put giant skeletons on their lawn during Halloween.
Yep.
Okay,
But this is
that's
all
it.
year. Yep.
And listen, the neighbors near me 100% still have theirs up. There's two of them. They're like almost across the street, and I'm just like, that's because I don't know what goes into keeping those in the ground because we've had some strong windstorms lately, and they're still
No.
upright.
Oh, wow.
So they must have the like metal. There's concrete poured or something. I don't know. I
The
don't know.
wind knocked a trash can into someone's car the other day over here.
But like like Spider said, I mean, if you throw any form of devotion sorry, into the mix, that's what you're going to get. I mean, look
Yeah.
at fan bases. Fandoms are out of this world, and they're very similar to cults.
Yep. Star
Um,
Wars changed the law.
their things are the best things, and your things suck, and that's it. The one thing about Santa Muerte that I find fascinating is, the clientele of Santa Muerte is a mixed bag. It's a lot of it is the cartels and things, as we
Yeah.
saw in Ghost Recon Wildlands, but a lot of it is the poor folks, and we see that is a common theme among cult like things is um the amount of the poor folk that are involved in this. And I want to, I think we should also distinguish something, as opposed to a literal human being that you're giving power to, you're giving power to a deity, strictly a deity. Um, there's not a lot of wealth involved in this one, though. That's the key thing to take away from here, because you're not giving a lot of money to Santa Muerte. You're giving like cigarettes, or you're giving coins, or you're giving
Beer.
alcohol. Yes,
Things that you
tequila,
enjoy.
right?
Yeah.
Because it's almost like I'm giving you a part of me, right? This is a part of my habit, but I'm giving it to you because I enjoy it, so I want you to enjoy it. And that is, I think that's where it really is, for me. And that's really just what it is for me. People, if they are fanatic about something, they will go to the ends of the earth to prove their fanaticism. We've seen it. We've seen it. Like you brought up earlier, Jim Jones. Another key one that we haven't brought up in even the past shows, I don't think, is David Koresh. Another one. He thought he was Christ reincarnated. Manson.
That seems to be common amongst cults.
It really is. It really is. But in this case, they just venerate her. That's it. And I think that's what really fascinates me about it, is they venerate her, right? They don't venerate a person. There's nobody that's in charge of this thing. And like Spider said, I think that makes things dangerous. I think it makes it real dangerous, because there's
the line.
There's nobody you can take out to stop it from happening. There's no inner circle. So if one man falls, another one takes its place. But you can get rid of human beings, or you can lock human beings up, right? How are you going to lock up a deity? How are you going to go lock? I mean, sure, you can tear down the statues, as happened. As happened. But like you just said, it's an idea. And it's hard to kill an idea. And 10 to 12 million people, hard to kill an idea. So
And
Mm.
since you mentioned it, with 10 to 12 million people, that many people thinking about one thing and believing in it that fiercely, uh, that might just create a tulpa.
and I was going to mention that too because Spider and I have read American
I
Gods.
was just thinking about
Yep.
that. I
Yeah,
was
and
just thinking about it.
it's the same concept. Are
Yep.
you giving this being so much power that you're willing it into existence? And I want to pull on something for a quick second.
Go ahead.
In the Bible, there's the big letter Elohim, which is God, and
Okay.
there's the lowercase Elohim, meaning foreign gods. And these people believed in them, Baal and everybody else, the Canaanite god, because people throughout time uh, cannot um, go off faith alone. They have to have an image because a lot of people can't comprehend
To
faith.
associate it.
They have to. That's why in the Bible the Jews had so many problems moving through the land because they always wanted a physical representation. First it was the golden calf that Moses destroyed, right? Then it was the ark. They had to take the ark with them, because it was God down on earth. Up in the mountain, you saw God. That's where Moses was when his face turned white and his hair turned white. Uh, so they had to have a physical representation of God, um, and that's throughout time. You have Vishnu, you have all these other gods, right? I mean, even in Islam, people say, well, there's no, you're not allowed to have this, that, or the third. But a lot of their imams, they've got pictures of them all the time. And and one of the groups we're going to talk about later, they've got pictures of that man all around. Now, the more fanatical side will say if you have a picture of Muhammad, it's a problem because they don't. But that's a whole other story. Uh, I just wanted to 100% say that these people need physical representation in order for these deities to exist. And they give them power, right,
Hmm.
by belief.
Focusing on the image.
And let me tell you, they have registered prayers at the Kaaba on focus, and it has a reading. The energy has a reading. What are you creating with that type of energy? It's. I just think that concentrated energy does something. That's
I've
why.
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry, I'm going on. I apologize.
Oh no, you're fine.
That's why in Auschwitz, Treblinka, you feel that energy. It don't feel the same as being in your house. It's a different type of energy, and I
Yeah.
think that that's what happens.
I just wanted to say to agree with you. I've actually read a lot of studies and research that actually says that a bunch of people having faith and a really strong belief in something can eventually create it.
Well, I mean, look at it like this, right? Have you ever wanted something so bad? And I don't mean this negatively, so I shouldn't put so bad. But have you ever wanted something positive and you just think about it nonstop, 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 nonstop? It's all you can think about. And then you attain it? Very similar. Very similar.
The law of attraction.
Yes. And you got to be careful. James makes a good point. What are you feeding? Because what if this is just a spiritual being that has been something else, right?
And it
And you're on
was
the land where they worshipped, and there's a god that they talk about, an Aztec god. I'm not going to try to pronounce it because, much like Spider in that 15 syllable sentence that I did see, and that was crazy, I will 100% botch that. So, and like I said, I don't mean to take all the time away.
Oh no,
I
you're
just
good.
wanted to say that you got to be careful what you're giving your energy to.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Now to finish up with Santa Muerte, real quick. Uh, Her son was gunned down in his car in 2008, and his mother was appalled at the impunity of how the perpetrators were treated. While she had not been a follower while her son was alive, after he was gone, she turned to holy death and vowed to extend the folk saint's reputation if she would bring justice to these criminals who had targeted her son. Vargas made good on her promise, believing in the power of holy death, and became a major public spokesperson for Santa Muerte. While most mainstream media seems to present Santa Muerte in association with criminals, as we discussed earlier, the folk saint is actually amoral, meaning they will do both good and evil and will not judge anyone either way. One of the most popular donations to Santa Muerte, as we mentioned earlier as well, was beer, as people would just share whatever they personally enjoyed as a way of showing familiarity with this folk saint, as was common amongst these types of saints. And the media likes to point out that the criminals do worship Santa Muerte, but believers would also like to point out that this may be true, but though, as you mentioned earlier, this is only one aspect of a much broader belief. It would be the equivalent of assuming all Christians are criminals because there are many criminals who convert to Christianity and continue their life of crime, or to assume that Jewish people are criminals if you heard of a Jewish person being arrested or something like that. So, anything else you two would like to add on Santa Muerte before we continue?
No, I'm good. I'm actually eager to get to the next one because there's some
Yep.
interesting thoughts about that, and then we have a couple of announcements after that too that we have to make
All
before
right.
we finish up.
All right. Rob, you good?
Um, the only thing that I wanted to say is that with 10 to 12 million followers, if they wanted to do something, they could.
Definitely.
If they wanted to do something, they could. Um,
I wouldn't
like you
even call
said,
it a religion at this point.
yeah, it's. I think I think this is the one example, and I'm glad we had this that treads the line. Like
Mhm.
Yeah.
it could tip either way, but I think it's treading the line because it gives a certain wealth. I think there's wealth to the things you enjoy, and when you give it to somebody else, it's kind of like sharing that wealth, your personal wealth.
All right.
But
So,
yeah, that's it.
you ready? All
Let's
right.
go.
All right. I'm going to go through this one kind of quick just because we're running kind of low on
Oh,
time.
listen. You
Huh?
not to interrupt you.
We
You
can
don't
go
have
past.
to. We can go
Okay.
past. Take your
Okay.
Yeah, we
time.
can go
Take your
past.
time. Take your
Okay.
time.
Okay. Well, with this one might be a little touchy, so we're going to be careful with this one, but everything we're presenting is facts. So, as people may have heard about the Syrian situation, this is kind of tipping the line with that as well. Bashar al Assad and many other people in the Syrian government belong to a secretive religious minority known as the Alawites. They are situated mainly in Syria and are sometimes known as Nusayris, but both of these terms are seen as derogatory. And honestly, I'm not sure why. Do either one of you know why these are seen as derogatory?
It's just what they were called by people who didn't like what they were talking about. It was just
Ah,
it was the Sunnis that
okay.
basically gave them that negative connotation.
Okay. So the Nusayris appears to have been the common terminology for these people up until the 1920s, after which point they came to be known as Alawites. They are not to be confused with the Alevis situated in Anatolia. People often debate if the Alawites belong to Sharia law with Islam or if they are indeed their own separate and unique religion. Said to have originated with Muhammad ibn Nusayr al-Namiri from the 9th century, which is where the name Nusayris was derived from. Supposedly was a student of the 10th and 11th Muhammad. I'm talking about Muhammad. Sorry, wanted to clarify that. Was supposedly a student of the 10th and 11th Shia Imams of the Twelver Shia branch, Ali al-Hadi and Hassan al-Askari. So, Rob, you're my professional with this type of stuff. Do you know anything about Sharia law or any of this other stuff that they're talking about here?
So the 12 imams, let me give a little backstory, and I'm not going to go
Okay.
on, I promise. Let me give a little backstory about Islam in and of itself. Okay.
Okay.
So Islam has what is called the Quran. Everybody knows what the Quran is, um, which is their version of the Bible in a sense. But unlike Christianity, which doesn't have a lot of exegesis, you can count the Dead Sea Scrolls, but I count the Bible as being a compendium of all of those books in one. The Nicene Council, obviously, I think that's another time. But Islam's different. Islam has what are known as hadiths, and hadiths are exegesis speakings on the Quran. So you might have an imam that talks about this, that, and the other. Um, then that's taken into a book. And you have all these imams that give extra or additional information into these because, as you'll talk about, um, Muhammad doesn't play a key role in this belief system. It's strange, but it's one of the and I was fascinated just like Spider. I didn't know this was a thing. Um, but the fact that is it Mohammedan by nature, like most of Islam is, your larger, part of Islam is what kind of fascinates me. And these 12 imams were basically prophets. They were,
Okay.
prophetic type people. Um,
Like the book of Ezekiel in the Bible or something
yes,
like that.
yes. And as we'll see, they actually took some folks from the Bible and they're part of their belief system of
Oh yeah,
how
that
this
one's actually
all
pretty interesting.
orchestrates.
That
So
part's
I
pretty
won't I
interesting.
won't say it. I'll let you say it. But yeah, a lot of this is it's almost a mystic form of Islam, much like the whirling dervishes and the name is drawn a blank. The Sufi mystics. It very much
Oh,
reminds me of Sufi mysticism in a way, and you'll get to that because it is a syncretic belief. It adopts uh, practices and beliefs from other belief systems.
okay. And Spider, would you like to say anything so far?
Um, well, the interesting thing about this, and I admit, I had I've been watching the Syria situation recently, and I've been following that for quite a
Yeah,
while, to be honest. Like way back when we first tried, the USA specifically, to try to push a regime change there. I saw
I
the
remember
terms, I
that.
saw the Alawite and all that else. I saw these things and I was interested, but I didn't look into what that actually meant. And now that I have, I'm super interested because the Alawites are very, very different in some very core beliefs from the rest of Orthodox Islam, I
Yes.
guess you could say, which is the Sunni and the Shia. And they're both button heads too because they can't get over the succession between from Muhammad. That's where
Yep.
their argument is. But
Yep.
the Alawites are part of a group of beliefs that mostly have died out according to mainstream stuff, but I'm sure there's a lot of little groups out there that still kind of hold to that old line of thought. It's just not popular to do that. But they subscribe to an older, almost a Gnostic belief, and the Gnostics are
Yeah.
great. The Gnostics are fan. No, I mean, I don't mean that they're great people because they did some pretty weird things, but it's a fascinating case study in a lot of old
Yes.
religions.
One hundred
And the
percent.
Alawites, contrary to mainstream Orthodox Islam, which is that the only person who is divine is God.
Yeah.
No one else is divine. Not like they acknowledge that Jesus existed. They acknowledge that Abraham, all these other people, Muhammad, all those, but none of them were inherently divine. They were all people. Whereas the Alawites instead say that people like Muhammad were divine because they carried the essence of God. And the
Yes.
people who came after him, who carried on his work, are also divine. They carry the spark of divinity, which
Yeah.
is a big no-no in Orthodoxism.
That
Yeah. Yeah.
that is the part that got confusing.
And
Yeah.
what's so interesting is that this little group of believers who looked at that as how everything was supposed to go became the part of the ruling party in Syria.
Yes. That
They
was
were in
that was the
charge.
keynote. That was the key thing. They got into the government and they
And
started to become the government.
A
it's
lot of
fascinating
them.
that they existed as long as they did because Orthodox
Yeah.
Islam, they
It's
have
heretical.
gone on like
It's
it's
heretical.
strictly heretical. It's a pure heresy.
They drink
It's
alcohol.
they
They drink alcohol. They
uh-huh.
partake in wine. Yeah. It's
And
on
they
and
do
oh,
mass.
sorry.
They do mass. They do the Catholic mass. They do the bread
Yeah.
and everything.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah, just like
Orthodox
Christianity.
Islam is
Yeah.
like, no, you don't do
Yeah.
that. None of this is right. But Syria
Yes.
just carried on like, yes, we do. This is
There-
what we do. And that's part of the problem with why everything was so kind of like under the street, basically.
Yeah.
There's all this unrest just growing. And the fact that the ruling party in Syria could crush so much opposition for so long, it just boggles my mind that
Yeah.
they were able to do that. And now that
Yeah.
that's gone, I don't know if you'll ever see a situation like that in that part of the Middle East ever again.
And that's the whole thing too. And not to derail you, Stephen, but this fascinated me to
Yep,
no
me
end.
too.
The interesting note here is they infiltrated the government. Well, they didn't even infiltrate it. They were
No.
part of it. They wanted to be
Appointed.
From the
part of
beginning.
that, right? And I think the belief system in itself isn't a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing whatsoever. I think it's
I
better than
kind of dig it.
orthodox. It's better than
Certain
orthodox
parts of it. Sorry.
Islam.
Yeah.
No, that's okay. It's a fascinating topic, but that was what was doing it for me. But then I read, you read that Bashir al-Assad was one of these guys, and you're like, you were just a larger cult figure, a very cult of personality level cult figure, much like Kim Jong Un. Um, and it's on a scale that, because Kim Jong Un and a lot of your people of that
It's a cult.
form are not religion based at all. They don't believe they are the God and you will
Yeah.
worship them. But no, this is God's because they believe that God incarnated in different.
People.
Abel was one, Abraham was another, Ali,
Peter.
because they say there's no other God but Ali. That
Mhm.
is heretical in and of itself. So, Islam was like, no. And, Spider, because I've been watching the Syrian conflict for a long time, ever since we got involved years and years ago. I've kept my eye on it, and me and you have had some discussions about it. And, I have to wonder if Orthodox Islam sent that guy. I forget the general's name off the top of my head.
Mhm.
Sent that general in
Commander
there.
Pantera? Oh wait, no, that's
No,
the
no,
other
that's
guy.
Santa Muerte.
Yeah.
Because
But yeah,
because
he,
is
yeah,
Iran, which is their
yeah,
main ally in the region, Iran is Orthodox to a fault.
to a fault.
They're 100% all in Orthodox.
Mhm.
You will do what the Quran says, the way that we interpret it, and that's it. There is no other way around it. And here's Syria, one of their biggest allies, just being like, nah, we're gonna do what we want. We're gonna say what we want. We're gonna drink what we want. But we're gonna help you out, so you have to put up with us. So you could be on the right track there. That somebody, which is super fascinating because that somebody was always also backed by the United States.
Yeah, that always seems to be a key
You
aspect
get
in
all
these.
these
Yeah,
cross things going
yeah,
on, and it makes that whole situation so complicated and so complex and just really suspect at the same time. And it just, we could go on for days just
yeah.
about
The
this
the
here.
geopolitics in
Yeah.
that region as a whole are fascinating because right now, Israel is bombing Lebanon, and they're getting awful close to the Temple of Baalbek. And if that place gets destroyed, I will be hurt.
Mm,
I will be
mm.
hurt because that has been there before the Romans. And just a side point here, and we could talk about this at some other point. The Temple of Baalbek was given to every other civilization that came after it, and nobody knows who really built it.
Oh wow.
So if we lose that, we're losing a part of history that, I mean, the Library of Alexandria was the biggest tragedy. This would be another one. It would be another one. Sorry, I get very passionate
Okay.
about things like that.
You're
It,
good.
it's
do.
all great it's all great discussion.
Yeah.
Like I said, this could be an entire like series of shows all on its own. But
Oh, the Middle East in and of itself, the geopolitics there and the religious aspect would 100% be. It would be a series. It would be a 100% series, a symposium, if you will, just to put ourselves up here. You know what I mean?
So the Alawites, honestly, they remind me of like an Iran/Syrian version of the Illuminati almost.
The only reason I would say not is, and correct me if I'm wrong here, their partners were funneling them the money,
mm,
right? Russia being one of those, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Russia, I think, and Bashir al-Assad were,
they're the fall guys.
you know,
Okay.
and yes, Spider's right. They're the weakest of the link. So when the weakest of the link is starting to become so weak that the world sees it and you're having problems, and it was also, Israel was in on that too. You had so many people that when that fell, everybody was getting involved. And that is another like there's so many intricacies to this place,
Yeah.
to the Middle East as a whole.
Very
What are
complicated.
you trying to destroy? Because who knows what Bashir al-Assad had in that palace? They burned the coffin of his father with his father's body in it, torched it, torched it.
Yeah.
So and I guarantee you, the next time somebody over there says Alawite, it's over. It's a wrap. You will not that you're witnessing the death of an entire belief system.
Mm.
Unless they're able to get to another country that would, but like Spider said, none of those Islamic countries would tolerate it. Lebanon has a policy that if they find spell books in your home, or witchcraft books in your home, you will get the death penalty, or you'll get a severe length in prison, like the Shems al Makharif. If that is found in your home, automatic death penalty. I mean, they believe that you can summon jinn to attack your political opponents. So something's there. Something's there. I'll say it till they put me in the ground. Something's over there. I don't know what it is, but something is there.
All right. So eventually, Muhammad came to see himself as a prophet, as you said about the Imams earlier, and the Imams as divine scripture when he received a revelation from al-Askari, which formed the basis of his new religion, which would distance itself from Islamic law and practice. Eventually, he came to see himself. Oh, wait, I just read that. Sorry. Sarir ibn al-Qasim al-Tabarani is often considered the founder of the Nusayris within Syria and was able to successfully spread the movement on the Syrian coast. The most important book for Alawites is known as, I'm going to try my best here,
You got this.
Kitab al-Majmu'ah.
There you
Book
go.
of the collection,
There you go.
which was possibly written by al-Tabarani, though some claim it to be a forgery, so we can't be entirely sure one way or the other. So, Rob, did you know about this being a forgery, potentially?
Yes, I had seen that too, that it could have possibly been just a wacky person who wrote it. Just somebody that was off their rocker, if you will, and wrote this entire book, because that does happen in history. A good job on your pronunciation for a person who speaks Southern Arabic.
Is that what we're going to call it?
You did quite well. It's just so our audience is clear. Arabic, as a person who's trying to learn it, is a hard language to learn. It
involves a lot of throat. A lot of throat. It's difficult.
It is. You have to like this.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. But and Hebrew's the same way. So it's like, man, it's just like you're about to spit on somebody. That's how you have to do it. Like the Shems al Makharif.
Great. Yeah.
The Shems
camels. It's all about the camels.
Yeah.
Right.
They taught them how to speak.
They also claim that the
Explicit.
Quran is another very important book of scripture for the Alawites, and they believe that they were originally lights that surrounded and praised God,
Yeah.
but were punished for a revolt by being sent down to earth in physical bodies to undergo the process of rebirth as a form of reincarnation, and life on
Gnostics.
earth is seen as a punishment, and much like Hinduism, the ultimate goal is to escape the cycle of rebirth and return to the
Samsara.
heavens once again to be one of these lights. They
Yeah.
also believe in a god known as Ali, which I believe Rob mentioned earlier, and that God has been reincarnated up to 7 times in history, known as Mana, and they are as follows. Would either one of you like to say anything else before we go through this list?
Um, the one thing that's kind of funny to me, right? As we're going through
All right.
these cults, save for Santa Muerte, because I don't view Santa Muerte like I do the backpack and the in this one. Um, it's always ridiculous. And you would think a person with common sense would be like, no, you're a dingus. There is no way that that makes sense. There's certain aspects of this that I think are beautiful, right? But then there's other things when I'm looking at it from a logical point of view,
Like, what?
baffle my brain. Like the fact that they think the Quran is important and not all encompassing like Orthodox Islam does is interesting. It's just like somebody said, you know what? I like this book and I like this book and I
But not
like,
this part.
I like this part, but we're gonna take that out, and all of the people around you are like, if you take that out, I'll cut all your hands and your face and everything. You'll die. Your whole family will die. Everybody's dead. Bloodline's
No.
gone. Right? But they're like, what's the worst that could happen? What's the worst that could happen? So like it's very interesting that with
It's
Santa
like me.
with Santa Muerte, I get the logic. The logic makes sense in my brain. Like
Mhm.
it makes sense. But the bike, nobody thought, hey buddy,
Here, take all my
you
stuff.
put that gold there. I know you did. Well, they probably did, and then they were the one of
Well,
the
800 people thought that, and then they ended up under the street. So,
um so for me what does it is there's so many steps to this. Talking about the gods like that reincarnated, that you were just
Yep.
lights floating around God. Nobody said, bruh, how high are you right now?
Yeah.
Tell me how high you are. Because there's basic principles
Yeah.
with Santa Muerte, right? There's not 7 Santa Muerte. There's not this, that, and the other.
Mhm.
Just one. Just one. Bayek, one person. One person. The Alawites, 7. 7. So you would think that the common sense would kick in to say, okay, but like Spider said, it's Gnostic. They took ideas from Gnosticism, and not Christian Gnosticism, which is different. There's a Gnosticism, and this is the one that they took it from. I love Gnosticism. I'm not a Gnostic, like
Yeah.
Spider said, but it's a fascinating journey into how people view themselves. Sorry, I'm rambling.
You're good. And Spider, anything you'd like to say?
there's so much of this from outside of Islam it's surprising that it managed to survive at all. The thing of it is that all of the other Islamic offshoots like this are pretty much extinct.
I think the only one, and not to cut you off, Sufism is the only one that is almost on par with the Sunni Shiite thing. You know what I mean? Sufism, that's it. And that's it. So, and Spider said, for that to live that long, mind boggling.
Just
sorry.
The fact that they have divinity spread out the way they do is such a big red flag for most of Orthodox Islam. And then
yes,
the fact that they acknowledge that, oh yeah, we're all created from the souls of basically evil, because that's what the light, supposedly they rebelled against God,
Yep.
and they were punished to
That's original
reincarnate.
sin, right?
Like
Yeah.
samsara, the concept, the Eastern concept of just continuous rebirth
Yeah.
until your soul gets it right and you're completely purified, until you hit nirvana. It's the rest of Islam isn't like that. They're like,
No.
no, you either do your good works and follow Allah, or you're a sinner and you suck and you deserve to die and to
Yes,
burn
that's
forever.
it. That's it,
And that's it.
and
There's no
that's it.
compromise.
No, and the thing is, I can get Christian Gnosticism. I get it because parts of the Bible where Christ is talking about love and about hidden messages, you can get the transition. You can't get the transition from the Quran to the
No,
Kitab. You just or
nah, no,
the
no.
Book of Collections. No, no, people get killed. It even says if you touch any word in the Quran, if you take anything out, we will kill you. We will come to your house and kill you. I remember when they were drawing pictures of Muhammad, the cartoonist, the Danish dude,
South
and they
Park.
went over and killed him.
They did. They went over because they were in France.
Yes.
They were in France, like working for the newspaper, and they all got the entire office got
All of them.
attacked.
Wow.
All of them.
And I made posts about it at the time because I was like,
Yeah.
oh, there's going to be a lot more cartoons in the world tomorrow because people don't put up with that on the other side.
There wasn't. There
But
wasn't as
people
many
just were like, okay,
cartoons.
I guess we just won't. I guess we'll just let them do their thing because that's how powerful
Yes.
Orthodox Islam is. And to
Yes.
have this little group in power
In power.
with these things, like, I can't get over it.
They got into the government where the government of Islam is the strictest part of Islam. That is the Islam that supersedes Orthodox
get over it.
Islam is governmental Islam. Like, come on. Like, they base everything around the Quran and the Hadiths. If it's not in any of those, it's a wrap. You're and the Hadiths aren't even they're fought over. People will fight over the Hadiths because the Hadiths are just imams giving their exegesis on the topic. Oh, you don't like this Hadith 47 by, Ali Muqtab? No, I don't like that one. Good, we're fighting. And I'm going to kill you. And it's extreme.
Jeez.
So for something like
and
this
justified,
to exist,
depending on how, who believes it or not. And so the fact that they've got these really fascinating rebirth concepts and the reincarnation and all this other stuff, it is probably one of the most progressive ideas that you will have seen in Islam in ever.
Yeah.
And now it's basically getting wiped out because some jerkwad used it to prop themselves up in the name of stability in the country. And from the outside, it looks like, oh, yeah, they kept the country pretty stable for the longest time. But then you find out how that happened.
Yeah.
And these people basically they're the fall guys. They're the fall guys.
Who knows if at some point he didn't tell somebody that he should be put in there as God. It would not surprise me. And I don't mean to rabble once again, but now that Spider and I know this kind of changes the dynamic for this whole thing. And that right there is interesting.
Yeah.
You can tell I'm fired up and excited about it.
I'm fired up
too. I waited the whole show to get here. I waited the whole show to get here. So
yeah, because I was cool with Santa Muerte because I already know a lot about it and I like talking about it. But this is new information, but it's so impactful on a scale that I didn't think was because they didn't mention this a lot when they talked about Bashir al-Assad. None of that was talked about. None of it. They never said that he was an Alawite. They never
see the
said
term
that he was an
Alawite thrown
Alawite.
around, and like, oh yeah, they got the Alawite sacked, and then they leave it at that. But it's so vitally important what that means as far as the actual deep-seated beliefs.
Yes.
Because it makes parts of the rebellion and it makes parts of what eventually happened completely in a slightly different light because there's this undercurrent
Yes.
that it was about something else completely other than what you saw in the news. You saw it
And
as the people against the dictator, but
yes,
there is some very deep-seated religious,
yes,
spiritual warfare going on over there.
yes,
And it
because I gotta say it. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but usually in these situations, media outlets will call it out instantaneously that it's a cult, or they'll call it
Yep.
out instantaneously as this is religion again. We tried to tell you about religion, 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 but they didn't. They didn't talk
They were
about it.
scared.
mm,
That right there, no, they weren't scared because a lot of mainstream media will side with Orthodox Islam,
Mm.
you know. But the fact that that didn't happen, that Al Jazeera didn't go in depth about it, has me to believe that the Islamic higher ups were afraid. They were afraid. And that's why they sent somebody in to basically overthrow the government. There's something about that they were afraid to let out. And yeah, you can read about it. Of course you can read about it, but it's different when a major media outlet like Al Jazeera, CNN, Fox, all those, there's something when nobody says it. And that is my take. Good night, everyone. No, I'm kidding.
show's over. Close the doors.
Shows it to a close up, see subs out.
All right, so now we're going to go into the mana. They believe that Ali, the god you were talking about earlier, has been reincarnated up to 7 times in history uh, as Abel, Seth, Joseph, Joshua, Asaph, Peter, and finally Ali. But, strangely enough, each of these people, while often being friends with great prophets, were never great prophets themselves. Every time which God is reincarnated, he brings with him associates known as Al-Ism, the name, Al-Hajib, the veil, and Al-Bab, the gate. The name and the gate are known as great prophets and are as follows: Adam, Noah, Jacob, Moses, Solomon, Jesus, and Muhammad. The idea that each of the great prophets was a veil meant to hide the true identity of God. So, for example, Jesus was a veil for Peter, meant to hide his true identity of God, which at the time was actually Peter in his true manifestation. Each of these veils is also accompanied by a gate, not all of which are known. Alawites have a few holidays which they participate in and celebrate, such as Christmas, Nowruz, which is the Persian New Year, Eid
Shouts out to
al-Fitr,
Mosin.
Eid al-Adha, Ashura. Here's the catch, though. Many of these holidays have been rebuilt from the ground up using Alawite
Yeah.
beliefs and often lack certain aspects of the original holiday. Though it is said not to be quite so strictly observed these days, there is technically supposed to be 5 prayers a day, and they do not have a typical place of worship and will often worship at home. During the rule of the Ottoman Empire, the Alawites had their lands confiscated and were first forced to work the land as farmers. So, what do you guys think about them being forced to work the land as farmers? Spider?
Spider, I got a really cool realization I just had, so I want Spider to go first.
Oh,
Just
okay.
because like this is actually pretty mind blowing, but y'all go ahead for a second because I gotta find this.
Well, that's the other thing too, is that they don't. The Alawites don't do the daily timed prayers that Orthodox Islam does. They have the call to prayer with the bell and everything like that, and the where they shout during, like, in modern cities they have like a megaphone system, an intercom system where they just shout out the chant and whatever.
Ah.
But the Alawites don't do that. They don't. They do what they need to during their time at home. They don't have a specific set time. They don't bow to Mecca. They don't bow to Medina. They don't do those things. And it just, what's interesting is that they have the perspective they have on Trinity. Instead of having Father, Son, Holy Ghost, they basically have they have a prophet, they have a word that the prophet speaks, which is another person, even though it's not the same. And then they have something that happens after that, which is the gateway to God, which is the most holy person available at the time to get to God. And the gates stands out because that's another part from Mesopotamian religions. Mesopotamian religions were all about gates that led to their deities, and later on led to demons and things, according to the other religions that took over. If you look at some of the stuff, like, I know it's kind of hokey, but you look at like the Necronomicon kind of thing, it's all organized by gates. You pass through gates to visit certain deities to keep progressing through your spiritual journey. That wasn't just something that was created for that book for people just to indulge in. It was a part of Near Eastern religions from Mesopotamia for a long time, because they put that on the ziggurats, they put that on the pyramids. There was a gateway that you went through before you visited the high priest or the king or whoever who was supposed to be godlike. And that's how you ascended to a godlike level. You went through a gate. You couldn't just walk up to somebody on the street and be like, "Oh, you're godlike. Okay, hey, let's shake hands." You had to go through a gate. You had to be consecrated. You had to do these things. And so they had a person who was designated as, "You are the gate. You are the person we go to get to God, to get to divinity." Before you get to them, you have to go to the person who speaks the language of the gate, speaks the words. And before you get to them, you have to go to the previous representative. You had 3 people to go through to get to divinity. And it's a fascinating concept because, again, Orthodox Islam doesn't have that, because in Orthodox Islam, you don't touch divinity
at all.
You stay away from it.
Yeah.
It's there. It does what it wants. You worship it. You give it all that you're supposed to give it, but you don't get to touch it. When you die, maybe you become part of it. If you've done enough good works, if you've done whatever you're supposed to do, but you don't touch it because you are dirty, you're unworthy, you're here on earth, and that's how it is. So this is a huge departure, once again, from Orthodox Islam.
So I had an epiphany while we were just chilling and doing our thing. So God is reincarnated as Abel, right? That's the second one, or is that the first one?
Let me go through it. So Abel with Adam,
Okay.
Abel would be God. Seth is God.
No, stop there.
With Noah. Okay,
Stop there.
Okay.
I'm going to read you a scripture that it just clicked on my head.
So yeah, Abel and Adam.
Okay, here we go. So Genesis chapter 4 begins, "Now the human knew Eve, his wife. She became pregnant and gave birth to Cain, saying, 'I have acquired a man through Yahweh.' And then she proceeded to give birth to his brother Abel."
That's God. It literally says it right there in the Bible.
No, this is something somebody took and pulled from other beliefs into one
I see.
belief.
I see.
It's an amalgamation of
different
beliefs. Yes.
That's what I do.
And they just took the words and just twisted them with it.
Yep.
Just twisted them a little bit. And if you twist the words just a bit,
they spun it.
Then guess what? You've changed the whole dynamic of a belief system.
Oh, wow.
Just in doing just that. That's and then
they were sneaky.
And then wait a minute. To think that Abel was slain.
Forcing him to reincarnate into the next form.
Because when Yahweh gave Adam to Eve, his spirit was residing within Adam, whose spirit resided in Abel. So they just took this little twist, and bada boom, bada bing, realest one in the room. How you doing?
Made a whole thing.
Yeah. Wow.
That's how these things happen
Wow.
too. It's
Yeah.
one
Yep.
little detail
Wow.
often that people either disagree on or people think, you know what? I see this as something different.
Listen, the light. I just had another epiphany. The light that was circling around the sun, right? What did you say they did?
Which part?
The part where you talked about the lights
Oh,
around,
they said that they worshipped the god as lights surrounding him.
and then what happened?
They rebelled against him
Who
as
else rebelled against God?
Lucifer.
The
Morning
Watchers.
Star.
The
Yep.
Watchers.
Ah.
Well, the Morning Star means something else, but I won't get into that here because then there'll be a full on debate, and we're all hour and a half. So go ahead. I'm sorry. I've talked
All
too
right.
much, but I'm just really excited about all this
All right.
knowledge I just got in my brain.
So next, under the rule of the French, the Alawites were given autonomy and support from the colonial masters, whom would often support minority groups in order to destabilize the region and create opposition to the Sunni majority. That sounds familiar. I think governments do that a lot, don't they? Sorry.
No. No.
Aw.
Wow. The U.S. has never done that, ever.
Nothing like that. Anyways, in the 20th century, many Nusayris were so poor that they had to enlist in the military or work for the state, and this is where they began their strong relationship with the government. The name Alawites was used for the first time in the 1920s, previously having been referred to as Nusayris. The name comes from the name of Ali to convey their closeness to Shia Islam to both gain acceptance from the local Muslims as well as put them in direct opposition of the Sunni. After Hafez al-Assad passed away in 2000, his son Bashar al-Assad took over, and, well, we all saw how that turned out. The Alawites are all over politics, and some estimates even show as much as 80% of all the Alawites are working in the government.
80%.
Yep, with subsections and
80%.
different beliefs.
80%. And
Yeah.
listen, here, I get it. The religion was an amalgam and didn't hold to one specific tradition. And they saw that and realized they didn't have to hold to one specific position either, because it goes on to say that some of them venerate Muhammad and some of them don't. It just depended who was around at the time.
Yep.
Come on, man. Come on. This is big brain material right here. This is
Divide and conquer, as James said.
This is it. I like how I made the divide symbol, by the way. Thanks for giving me PTSD back to high school. Anyways, no, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
Spider, would you like to say anything about that?
Wow.
No, I think if we keep on going, we'll be here all night.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
I just think
finishing
it is fascinating.
We used to do
Super
2-hour shows, so and a good
Yeah.
topic, man. I could go 3.
Mhm.
Okay, so the last little part right here, the last part that I have for us is the subsections that I mentioned with differing beliefs. They have 3 of them. The Shamshi, who believe Muhammad had an equal or superior role to Ali, which is God. The Murshidi,
Heretical.
started by Suleiman
Heretical.
al-Murshid, and they seem to view al-Murshid as a divine or a prophet. And the
Heretical.
Plamari, who makes up the majority of Alawites, and they seem to view Ali as God.
Heretical.
And that was the last of my notes that I had. Anything else
Wow.
you two would like to add?
This has been the most in-depth, intellectually stimulating conversation I have had in a very long time. Because it's usually, if it's like Bigfoot or something paranormal like we do, there's a lot of loose ends because you don't know. You don't know what's going on. But here you know what's going on, and you know how things work, and you know the players in the situation. It's a very, I don't know, this might be one of like the coolest things I've ever learned about. Because at first I was like, okay, it'll probably be like the Sufi mystics. It'll be in that vein, which are fascinating in and of itself.
Yeah.
But when I started reading Gnostic traits, I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And then I started reading, like, how many have been reincarnated as God? I'm like, and then the fallen light. And I was like, why is all of this just an amalgam of everything else? And then it clicked. Bashir al Assad and all of them, they did the same thing. They just adopted different things because Bashir al Assad lived like a king. He lived like a king. He dressed like a king. A lot of like the Ayatollah, he doesn't dress like a king. He still has the, the robe, whatever they call it, and then sometimes the head wrap. But here's Bashir al-Assad with like $1,000 sunglasses, Louis designer
The
belts,
cars,
the
the
Rolls Royce
everything.
Phantom
Yeah,
2s, and people are looking at this dude like, I'm suffering, I'm poor. Unlike the Ayatollah, hey, he looks like me. He dresses like me. He sounds like me. Nobody sounded like Bashir al Assad. Because, and I get it now, the reason why 80% were in the government is because it was corrupt from the very beginning.
Yep.
It was corrupt from the very beginning. So bringing that information into this, I think, opens up a whole new layer, right? That will splinter off into different thoughts and different things. And that, yeah, this was one of the best conversations I've had in a long time regarding geopolitics in the Middle East.
Thank you, Sound Zeus and James.
Yes, thank you.
Before we finish up too, I
Yeah.
do want to mention we do have a couple of big things that happened separate from the conversation here.
Big things.
We have forums now. We have forums for people
It's
to
a
talk
thing.
about.
Yes, it's
And,
great. It's great. I've missed forums because I used to be part of forums back in like the early 2000s. Were great for forums. I always loved it.
I miss the Face Punch forums.
I just miss a good forum. I do.
I'll tell everybody that because right now the forums are free, so we only have like a set amount of space for posts, and then we'll have to start deleting things. I don't know how big it's going to get right off the bat. I hope it kind of stays a little slow so I can manage it at first, but then we'll see what happens. The link to the forums is connected to the main website.
Put that website in the chat.
And
also, no, I'm
right
sorry.
here
Go
on
ahead.
our little
I
ticker.
had it on my clipboard, and now Streamyard doesn't want me to use the clipboard here.
Do you want me
So
just to
I'm
put it
going
in the
to-
chat? I'll put it in the chat.
I had it saved specifically for this, and now I guess I can't.
You can also just
But
follow.
but there's a page.
Follow
for
the
it.
ticker. Follow the ticker
Yeah.
too.
That's what I was saying.
LTATM.net. Follow the ticker. And
When
we
you
can
go
put
to the
message.
website,
We'll put the forum in the ticker too next week.
Yeah, when you go to the website, there's that spot up on the upper left of it where you can do the drop down and you can
The
see all the
hamburger.
different pages on the website. And one of them is labeled official forums, and you'll find them. There's a button there to go to, and
You can make your post.
I've got some things there. I've got this Uncanny Earth specific topic for people to start talking about. I have a music topic, a gaming topic, and I think one other thing. There's a welcome message there that outlines the rules. I will warn you in advance, I'm 100% a dictator as far as those rules go.
Same, 100%. Because we will probably have access to those forums at some point.
Yeah.
Whenever
I haven't figured out
Spark
how
can
to
figure that
add
out,
other people as
moderators.
admin yet, but I'm going to
'Cause
try to
listen,
figure it out soon.
Just so you all are clear, I will rule with an iron fist.
Yeah.
I will not. I will not. I
Like a
will
Marvel
not.
hero.
I will rule with an iron fist. Both of us. We will Doctor Doom that all
That's how
day.
it's going to go.
You out of line, you're out. You're out. You're gone. You're gone. That's it. Simple as that.
But the forums are active. They're ready to go. By all means, start
Please.
posting and talking and
Please.
get the conversation going. We're going to start posting now that I've announced it. I didn't ask the other two guys to start posting yet until today because I wanted to make sure we had it announced and ready to go. And now all bets are off and we can just go to town.
Oh no.
So go there. You remember, Steven, I said no spam.
Yep.
I know you.
Steven,
No spamming
do
my
not think
spams.
that our rule spares you from acting like a ding dong doofus. All right, because we will rule with an iron fist.
Yep.
You will be Bayek. You keep playing around.
800 on the
Bye.
floor.
No. Black liquid.
Let's just edit that out in post there. But yeah, so we got that. Next week it's my turn,
Yeah.
and we're gonna talk about Egypt and
I
the.
think I'm sick. I'm sorry.
Well, we're gonna talk about what could be awesome or what could be a huge state of nah, you're full of it.
Scruffy
With
was really excited.
the SAR radar indicated supposed structures under the pyramids that have made big news. We're going to talk about that. I've got images. I've got all kinds of things I'm prepared for. It's going to get nuts.
Yes.
I
And
already
listen,
see it.
oh my
It's going to
gosh.
get nuts.
That's my second favorite thing right now too. That's my now with the Alawites is kind of like it's a little bit more interesting, but that second thing it would prove some theories I have. It proves theories I have. It's oh my goodness gracious, Saint Ignatius.
It's going to get nuts. So that's what's coming up next week. Back to Steven to wrap us up.
Just wanted to say Scruffy was really excited for that one. He's been looking forward to that one a lot.
Oh yeah. Let's go. And listen, it couldn't be ran by a better person on this regard. So I'm very happy for this next week's topic. So yeah, good stuff.
All right.
We're prepared. We're bulldozing ahead. We're not half cheek in the seat anymore.
Yeah,
we're all like
you should all be on the edge of your seat, like the monster
hard.
trucks say. Why pay for the seat when you only need the edge?
Yep.
Yes.
And as we say
Sunday,
around here,
Sunday.
First,
only we're on Thursday.
Thank you all for coming to hang out. Thank you to Sound Zeus, James, Lil Beans, and everyone else. Thank you all for coming to hang out. And as we say around here, why be boring when you can be uncanny?
Don't forget that outro.
Oh yeah, you already know.